It takes a major championship. It takes, you have to sometimes crawl deep down inside yourself and even surprise yourself as to the things that you're doing. But you have to persevere, and you have to have a lot of patience.
David and I first met back in 1968 at a junior golf tournament in Zimbabwe, what was then Rhodesia. When he got to about 17, we turned professional, and a lot of us were still finishing off school, and Dave was a particularly bright pupil, but he wanted to further his life in golf. He's a pretty useful player. Yeah, the fact is, I think he just enjoyed teaching more. When I first went to see him in America in 1982, I was running into a lot of problems with my game. I had the ability to play well for short periods of time, but I never had any consistency. In fact, only 3 months after first working with him, I very nearly won the British Open. And I think had I had 6 or 7 months working with him, I probably would have. You know, when you're going to change your swing and go into new ground, so to speak, you really have to put a lot of trust in the person that you're going to work with.
Mick, we have an interesting location for an instructional video.
Yeah, this is the kind of place that I'm sort of was familiar with before I came to see you, Dave.
Thanks. I think on this tape what we're going to cover is a lot of faults that players have, and we've worked on them ourselves, haven't we, over the years?
Well, not only for the good players, Dave, you know, a lot of the things that we've worked on, I've applied to the amateurs.
Has it been that long?
Believe it or not.
Seems about 20.
But a lot of the stuff that we've worked on, I've applied to the amateur partners that I play with in terms of my friends who I play with my weeks off, and I think it's going to help just about everyone.
Well, all the good players and tour players that have come to see me, and I've helped in some way, I've got a lot of feedback from them, and we found certain things that keep cropping up, and these are the things we're going to try to put over on this video, and a lot of the things that we've worked on. And so it's going to help the good player, but it's also going to help the average golfer get to that next level, improve their ball striking, and give them some of the secrets that we haven't let out before.
One of the things is we all have the same bad habits. You know, when I say that, we tend to do the same things over and over again, and even though we think we've got them beaten, we actually go back to them and they creep back in. So I'm sure that people are going to find that in some of the drills and that we've done, we're going to find something that's going to help them, and if they can just stick with it and persevere, don't just go for 1 day or 2 days and try it, but if you try it over a period of 3 or 4 weeks, you'll see that it'll creep into your game and it'll really help you.
Let's talk about the number one fundamental and probably the number one fault that I see with many golfers is the grip, because obviously if you don't get your hands correctly set on the club, you're going to hit a lot of poor shots, even though you might have a pretty good swing. Right, now, the thing that I see mostly with many players is the fact that they grip the club too much in the palm. Now, I've just hijacked this glove from one of these players that has a poor grip. I promise you it's not my glove. And we can see the wear up here, and that's simply because the fact the club is too much in the palm and there's a lot of motion, a lot of movement with the club during the swing.
Right.
And this is very, very common. And the big problem is unless you set your left hand, and particularly your left hand on the club correctly, you're not going to be able to use your hands correctly, not going to be able to get the wrist action right, and causes a whole host of bad shots. So let's have a look at your left hand, see how you position it.
Well, one of the things that I've always tried to do, David, with my left hand is to hold the club parallel to the ground right out in front of me here. I have the thumb going down the center of the shaft, a cup in the left wrist, and I can see 1, 2 knuckles.
Right, now let's just open this left hand and have a look where it is. And you can see it's across the palm, through that first finger, here, and basically it is a palm grip, but it's also in the latter stages, or the lower part of the hand, in the fingers. So it's not purely a palm grip. And this will enable you, by gripping in this position, we can just see here, if I can just show the difference. So instead of having it running through there, it's now running there. It'll enable me to really get my wrist action working correctly. So important in a good golf swing.
Right.
What else do you feel? Do you feel any sort of pressure in maybe your last three fingers?
Well, I've always tried to grip it a little tighter in my last three fingers, and one of the reasons I come down the grip a little bit, not at the top here, is to make sure that I have these last three fingers on the club.
Right. Now the right hand, certainly the left hand's the most important, but the right hand, I see problems with many golfers who tend to grip it too much in the palm, and also the right hand's too far up the club. It's too short a grip in other words.
Right, and what happens is, I have a good swing, when you come in through to impact, the club face is going to turn because your right hand wants to go back to the square position, and it's going to close the club face, you're going to hook the ball. On the other hand, you might make a compensation and come through with your shoulders a little higher and hold on this way, and the ball is now going to go to the right.
Hand grip there and just see how you place it.
Well, as you can see, I've got it in the base of my fingers here, not too much in the palm like this, in the base of the fingers, and the lifeline here now comes over the top of the left thumb. And you can see the right thumb and forefinger, a little bit of a pitch.
Yeah, so see the right hand looks like it sits fairly long on the club, and the hands, the whole key with the hands is to let them work as a unit. Remember, they control the club face, maybe involuntarily so. In other words, you don't consciously try to control it, but wherever your hands are, they're going to control the club face. I think it's a good point to mention too, there are a lot of great players who do have maybe what we would call substandard grips, but they hit so many thousands of balls and they're so talented that they are able to sort of compensate for it. But basically, I mean, good golf begins. Absolutely. Well, I know, Nick, posture is one of the things that you work extremely hard on, and it's something that for every player, no matter what their caliber, it's something they have to get right, because to a large extent, the golf swing is all about geometry and getting your angles right. And getting your angles right means getting it right at address.
Absolutely. One of the things that I notice quite frequently when I'm playing golf with, doesn't matter what handicap player and even some of the pros, is that we tend to have round shoulders at address. And even though our legs might be flexed nicely and everything, you notice that our shoulders now get rounded, and we start reaching for the ball. We get the weight on the toes a little bit too much, and of course when you come through and you swing through, you're going to lose your balance and fall forward a little bit.
Exactly. You know, keeping your balance is so important because you're swinging at speed. Remember, you've got to set yourself in a position where basically your back is in the right position, because your spine is so important in making a good solid turn and keeping the club on the right plane. So learning to get your spine set correctly is what it's all about. And good balance allows you to swing the club in balance and obviously creates a consistent swing path. I think the key really is to start from the ground up, making sure that probably your feet maybe about shoulder width maximum between the heels. Okay, that gives you a good base. Feet turned out slightly, and certainly feeling a little flex in the knees. And this is a good exercise. This is a great drill, putting the club on your thighs. What do you feel when you do that?
Well, I'm feeling the pressure, and I'm feeling that the thighs are working against the club shaft there, and that I feel that I'm nicely braced.
Right, so you feel some sort of resistance there. And the weight is hanging right underneath you. In other words, you don't want your weight sort of forward. A lot of people, what they tend to do, they bend forward here, especially good players, and they counteract themselves by sort of sticking their rear ends out too much. So although you want your tailbone fairly high, you want your lower back pretty straight, and also your chin up. And that's one of the things that we work on, because obviously that doesn't allow the shoulders to turn correctly if the chin's down too much.
Right, if your chin is down, it's going to stop your left shoulder from turning underneath it. If your chin's up, it's going to allow the left shoulder to get underneath a little better and make a fuller turn.
Right. And I think the other thing is, if you set up to it now, certainly your arms are nice and relaxed, and you should feel certainly some weight about on the balls of the feet, sort of somewhere sort of around the laces.
Right. That's something that I've always felt really important. If someone comes up to me and tries to push me over, I'm going to be able to rock a little bit. I'm not going to fall one way or the other.
Exactly. So that little drill to get your posture right is vital. And then obviously to get set up to it at the right angle. In other words, to get your spine set correctly at the right angle, where you have a little tilt. Certainly your left side's going to be a little higher than your right, so the left hip and the left shoulder feel a little higher. And now you're in a good position to make a good swing. And I think the final thing that we always try to work on is trying to keep your arms nice and relaxed, because any tension here creeps up right through up into your shoulders, into your neck area, and obviously that tightness eliminates any feeling of freedom, and obviously you lose your rhythm. So posture, very important, and something that I always recommend is people get in front of a mirror to check it. They look at a good player on TV, for instance, and then try to copy that. Try to find somebody of your own build, get in a mirror and really check that posture position.
And I think it's also important to note, David, that the taller you are, the more emphasis there should be on posture.
That's a good point.
Shorter guys probably get away with it a little more because they're standing with the ball out in front of them a little way, whereas when you're taller, you've got more of a spine angle, and you've really got to pay attention to that posture.
Right. People with long legs have a problem. I know Nick Faldo has a problem always with his posture because of his long legs, so you're right. If you have short legs, it's a great advantage. Well, Nick, you know, with aiming, I think the secret to aiming is to tell people where you're aiming after you've hit it.
Yeah.
Well, certainly, if you're swinging well, all you've got to do is line yourself up at the target, get the club face aimed correctly, your body aimed correctly, parallel to it, and then pull the trigger, and hopefully you should hit the ball on the target.
Right, but invariably when we run into a problem, I think most of the players find that they start aiming right with the shoulders. And what that encourages you to do is to make compensation in your swing to come over the top of the ball and try and pull the ball on line.
The other thing, if you make a good swing from a closed shoulder position, which I agree with, many players, I see many top players have their shoulders and their eyes sort of aimed to the right. If they make a good swing, they're going to be coming too far from the inside and, in actual fact, hook it. So a lot of times alignment is as a result of you swinging poorly. You tend to compensate for it. So hopefully, you know, if you feel you're swinging well, I mean, getting lined up is obviously very important.
Right, I, like many other professionals, always have a tendency to aim to the right with my shoulders. And one of the ways that I combat that is to put these two clubs down, which are now parallel to my target line, and these will assist me in my alignment. Now I can see that my feet are square, my knees are square, my hips are square, my shoulders are square, and very importantly, that my eyes are square. And what happens when I do get into a bad situation, I'll find that my shoulders will be angled off to the right there, which is going to cause me to come over the top of it.
Right, and also when you start aiming to the right, your shoulders get too tilted and you get too far behind it, and also your eyes start to look to the right. So you've got to get your club face aimed up at your target first of all.
Absolutely, and that's something that we will align our bodies around, is your club face. So once you can put the club face down, the clubs here, you'll be able to see whether it's square or open or closed, and you can adjust your body accordingly. What I do is I come in behind the ball, I'll stand directly behind the ball, keeping my target in view, come in from the back, making sure that my chest is open. I'm looking at the target. I align my club face square to my target, and then I bring my feet in. Now you can see that my feet are now parallel, my shoulders now feel parallel, and I'm in a very comfortable position there. Now I can go ahead and just hit it.
Yeah, that looked great. It's almost like a railway track effect, isn't it? You get the club face on your target and your body pretty much parallel to the left of it.
And you might feel when you first do this a little uncomfortable, but after hitting 4 or 5 balls, you'll have the confidence that you know that these are aiming square.
Exactly. The final element we need to discuss, Nick, is the ball position. And I think for good players, obviously we see a tendency at times maybe to get the ball a little too far back in the stance.
Well, it's something that we always try and do. And I find that the further the ball gets back in the stance, I'm going to find the club coming from the inside too much, and I'm going to hook the ball. The optimum for me is just inside the left heel, Dave, where I'll have it nice and comfortable, just in front of my armpit here, as you can see.
I just hang that there, we can see that.
And what this encourages me to do is to chase after the ball toward the target.
Right, also tends to help you to get shallow on it and take a nice shallow divot with your irons. And obviously with your woods, you want the ball forward anyway.
Right.
And you might just show us with a 3-iron, and then we'll just show you with a 9-iron.
Okay, there's a 3-iron. I'll go ahead and hit this one. And then as we come in with a 9-iron, obviously I'm not going to stand as far away because the club's shorter, but I'm going to keep the same ball position just inside my left heel. My right foot has come from a wide position into here, and I'm just a little closer to the ball.
It's amazing because it really does look like it's further back. It's just an optical illusion when you move your right foot closer.
That's right, and people often think that the ball should go further back with the shorter clubs, but I've always liked to keep it there. Okay, so here I am, just in front of the left heel. Feel very comfortable.
That's great, nice shallow divot, perfect. The good setup includes the grip, the left hand, the club being placed diagonally across the hand into the fingers. The right hand, the club being placed down the base of the fingers. Posture, making sure you feel pressure on your thighs. Keep your back fairly straight and your chin up. Alignment and ball position, make sure the club face is pointing at the target and your body parallel to it. Try to keep the ball fairly far forward in your stance at all times. Well, we've discussed the basics prior to hitting a shot, in other words, getting set up to hit the golf ball. Now we've got to discuss the actual motion of the swing. And I think most importantly, the start of the swing for most players, they need to get right, because I see many errors happen very early on in the golf swing.
And really, if you think about it, David, once you get that part of the swing under control, everything should take care of itself. There'll be a few key moves that we think about later, but if you get set up correctly in the first part of your swing, it's pretty easy to do the next things right.
Exactly. Now the things I see with many players is, even if they've got a good setup position, the tendency is to get the club head going inside too quickly. There's that inherent fear of maybe taking it outside or picking it up, so they tend to take it in too quickly, and the club head actually gets too far behind their hands. They then have to somehow lift the club up to the top, and if they don't lift it, they carry on and play around. It gets too flat, so it creates a whole host of problems.
It does. And I think one of the simplest things to think about is that if you picture the shoulders, the hands, and the club head at address position, that the first move away is where they all move together. The club face slightly rotates to a slightly open position there at the 8 o'clock position.
Which is really square to my slight turn.
Right.
Right.
But you can see that your shoulders and your hands and the club head have moved in sync.
Exactly. If I actually turn and face the club now, I'm pretty much in the same position I was at address, whereas if I did this, you know, obviously I'd have to keep walking around and chasing my tail. So that's right. Why don't you just show us what it looks like?
One of the things that I've always done, and I think we've worked on it extensively in the past, is to make sure we put a ball down behind there, and this is just a simple thing. We line up on our target, and then when I take the club back, I try and brush the ball. You can just see, that's
good.
And that's going to make it a lot easier for you to keep the position that we're talking about right now.
Well, you can actually go ahead and hit a shot like this, and it's actually a really good idea because you get the feeling of sweeping the club head away.
And the wrists won't break too early.
Exactly, that's a good point, because many players who maybe have a problem picking the club up, this will actually get the club moving away nice and low to start.
A little bit of width early on is something easier to maintain late in the backswing.
That's right.
Well, Dave, one of the problems that I'm always faced with, and it's a habit that I've been fighting for a long time now, is that I get my hips turning too early in the backswing. And it's a problem that I see with a lot of the players out there.
Well, no question, Nick. I see a lot of players who hear that word turn. They think it turns, hey, make a big turn. And they get their hips or their shoulders turning so early on in the backswing. Maybe you want to illustrate it.
I'll show you how I do it.
There we go. I recognize that position.
Yeah.
You can see Nick's hips here have turned quite a bit, and really the club's only moved just a few feet. So Nick hasn't necessarily turned his shoulders that much, but I see a lot of players, even at this point, who've got almost a sort of a full shoulder turn, well, not quite, a three-quarter turn anyway, and yet the club has only gone back a short distance. Now, what this leads to is a situation now where really the club has got so much further to travel, and there's going to be a lot of independent arm movement to get to the top. Either that, or if you don't have a lot of flexibility, your swing is going to be very short. So it's very important to learn to synchronize the turn of the body, the hips and the shoulders that is, with the movement of the club, the hands and the arms. And this all starts in the beginning. And I think Nick will show the folks at home a little drill here that really helps to get into this position.
Right, what we're trying to do here is resist the right side from turning too quickly at the beginning of the swing. And what I do is I pull my right hand up here. The club is in the 6 o'clock position. I'm going to move it to the 8 o'clock position there. Here is my right hand, and I'm going to move this back, making sure that the forearms touch here and the club is in this position. Now you can see my right shoulder hasn't over-rotated in here. It stayed nice and in sync with the club head.
Right.
And from here, I'm going to put my right hand on the club and just basically go ahead
and hit it. Now that's an excellent drill, because what it does, it really teaches you where you need to be in what we call this 8 o'clock position. This 8 o'clock position, if you can get right there, a lot of people have so many problems in that first bit, whether, as we spoke about, with the club head or with the body turn. So if we can get that body sort of synchronizing early on, where we don't want a lot of turn. It's really the club head moves this distance and the body just moves a very short distance.
Right.
And that way you build up not only synchronization but also coil, which leads to power.
Right.
You want to feel you're actually moving just a little laterally. That gets your weight starting to move to the right side, and then you make the turn. It's what I call a lateral rotation.
Right, I'm sure a lot of people are going to confuse this now, Dave, with a sway. I know a lot of people, when I say to them, move the weight over onto the right side, they say, well, aren't I swaying?
Right, well, as long as your weight doesn't move to the outside of the foot, you're in good shape.
Right.
So the key being is, if we have a shaft up here, and we'll illustrate this with an umbrella in a second, but you literally want to feel like you're moving into this shaft and then turning away from it. See, that actually gets you to your right side. It really gets you moving behind the ball. So instead of standing and working around, say, a fixed center point here, you're actually moving around a point which is now down your right side. So it really does help you to get the feeling of moving this way and then turning. And if we place the umbrella on the ground, not quite vertical, at a slight angle towards you. Now the big key is, as you work it back, is that you really want to feel like you're moving into that umbrella and then turn away from it. So as you turn back, as you complete the backswing, certainly you'll move moving away from it. But to start with, you want to bump into that umbrella. And the weight will stay on the inside of the foot, but it does give you that feeling of moving into that right side.
Right, as opposed to what we were talking about earlier, which is that.
That's exactly
Where
right.
you see the angle, the distance has increased.
Precisely. Okay,
So
go
let's
ahead
go
and
ahead
shot.
and try.
Stand right up next to the umbrella, if you would. Thanks. No, that was good. See, it gives you the feel, and also visually you can have a look down and just check where you are, which is obviously of great importance. In summarizing the style of the swing, I'd like you to remember 3 major points. Firstly, to keep the club head outside of your hands as you start back. Secondly, to have resistance with your right side so that it does not turn too early. And thirdly, to make sure that you feel that your hips move slightly laterally before you make the turn. Well, these aspects have been relatively boring so far, Nick, so let's get into the meat of the swing, shall we, and talk about how we get the club to the top of the swing. And that pretty much involves talking about swing plane, and we want to check it sort of at a halfway back position. That's the point that I believe that we really need to have a look at.
Right, a good reference point I've always felt, David, is when the left arm gets to parallel on the way back, and it's much easier to see there when the club is on plane or if it's out of plane.
Right, well, plane, obviously, it's a geometrical term, and really we use the shaft at address as a guideline. So we can see, obviously, every club is a little different. The shorter irons are more upright.
A little bit more over here.
Right, and the longer clubs obviously flatter. But using this as a guide, what we want to try to do, certainly, is picture the swing being on a plane which is, say, lying on its side. But there again, we want to make sure that the most important aspect of the swing is the plane coming down. And in order to help that, we need to get the club in a good plane going back. Now, let's have a look at a couple of problems that we see at that halfway back point as far as the plane is concerned. Okay, well, the first one we see, which is very common, is the fact that the club is too, as we term it, laid off, where the butt of the club would actually point way beyond the ball. Now, from here, obviously, you've got to make a lot of adjustments to get it back online. Exactly right. Or otherwise, the opposite of that is where we see the club plane too steep. We can see the shaft plane here too steep. Now, somewhere between the two is our ideal position. And what we want to look at is trying to get the club on a plane which, as I say, allows us to get it back on a consistent plane or line
On the
or
downswing.
angle on the downswing.
Right.
So why don't you just show the folks here, if you just hold both clubs, this is a little exercise we use at times. There we are. Okay.
Right, the left forearm is in the parallel position.
Now, if we look at the shaft here, an extension of this one, it looks somewhere between the feet and the ball line, and normally a little closer to the ball target line. And I always feel, if you look at many of the top players, this is the position they really get in, where it's a little steeper than where it started originally. It started originally, say, at this point, at a halfway back point, it'd be a little steeper, and this will encourage, as the body moves correctly, a shallowing as it comes down, which we'll get into a little later. But this point here is very important to understand. We can see that the club is in a good position. The left arm is slightly across the body, although not stuck across the chest. The right elbow has started to fold outwards very slightly and is above the left arm. And we're in a good position there really to complete the backswing. You see, what I feel, Nick, is that this position, apart from a small turn, is the top of your backswing position. All you've got to do is turn and
get
boom.
to the top.
There you go. So this is an excellent checkpoint, and where many people are, in actual fact, a little out.
Right, and I think it's much harder to get to the correct position from the laid-off or a steep position here than it is if you've got it right here. Very simple move, because all we're doing is turning our shoulders to 90 degrees.
Exactly. And I would say if you're going to err in any direction, you want to err to a slightly steeper plane here rather than that one, which you then probably have to lift and get out, and you'll be out of position.
Right.
I know in your case, you have a beautiful change of direction, and you know, your club plane at times, maybe one of your errors, maybe it gets a little bit too steep at times. So we're obviously trying to work on trying to get it into what we would term a neutral plane for you. So that little exercise, the little drill that we use,
Okay, we choke down on the club. Get your
go.
hands right down on the bottom of the grip, almost touching the top of the shaft there. You have a little bit of the club sticking out. Take your normal stance. You'll be a little bit closer to the ball than normal. Then you get the club back through the takeaway position here to the halfway where the forearm is parallel. Now you can see.
Right. Now you can see here. Right, if we get into this position and Mick just completes his turn, we're in a perfect top of the backswing position. So what I'd like you to do, you can hit shots like this, and just to get your rhythm, just pump it a couple of times.
Right.
Make a little turn with your chest, all right, just once, twice, go ahead and just hit it from there.
And the big thing is when you do this drill is not to hit it too hard, Dave. You really want to do it more as a drill than trying to hit the ball too hard. So 1, 2.
That's pretty good.
Well, I didn't whiff it. 1, 2, 1.
When one focuses on faults at the top of the backswing, I think one tends to look maybe in the wrong place. A lot of people focus on what the left arm's doing and where it is and the position of it and so on. But I think a whole host of problems are caused through the right arm not working correctly. If you can get your right arm in the proper position, you'll certainly get into a proper position coming down into impact. And what I see a lot with a lot of players, and we've worked hard on this ourselves, Nick, is that fact that many players don't understand where the right arm should be. And the faults being that the right elbow gets too narrow here, so we lose width.
And very close to the body here.
Gets too deep behind us, which now gets the club out of position and makes the arms travel too far. And the other important thing is that if the right arm doesn't set properly as well, you don't get the correct wrist cock.
Right.
So we have to learn to get the right arm in the proper position so we can really load up this right shoulder, create a lot of coil, get the club on the right plane, and get it coming down to impact. We've got a good drill that we worked on quite a few years ago to get into the correct top of the backswing position.
Okay, the preset drill is when I take my normal stance here, and then I preset the wrists and the club into this position. Now you'll note that I haven't got my hands too far out, and I haven't got them too close into my body here. They're in a nice, comfortable position.
The shaft parallel to your feet line.
Right.
Okay, you don't want the shaft back here or over here.
Right.
Very important, because really this is the top of the backswing position. As long as the right arm stays relaxed, all you've got to do from here is simply make your turn. And there we go, in a good, solid, wide, wound-up position. You can see you've maintained the distance from here to here. We've got a right angle formed at the top there. Good distance under your right arm, so we've got an L almost both sides, on top and underneath. Now we're in a position that if we move correctly down, the club's going to get on a great plane, and also I've got plenty of power right there, Nick.
Right.
I remember when you did this drill, you felt more comfortable hitting balls this way you did from a regular position.
A lot of times it's easier because you're in the position you want to be in at the top. You don't have to worry about folding your wrists or cocking your wrists at the top. And you know, you saw how many balls I hit like this. I think I wore a hole in an 8-iron once doing it.
Okay, well, let's see here. So keep it nice and relaxed there and just make a good turn. And off we go. Oh, you still haven't...
That felt familiar.
No, you haven't lost the old feeling, that's for sure. That looked good. Mr. Guinea, all my joints are creaking here, Nick.
Yes, you're getting ready for the senior tour or something. You maybe need a little bit of WD-40 on that day, Dave.
Well, you can see we really focus so much attention on the right arm that we've devised a couple of little teaching aids to assist us in the proper feel. And, you know, the kids' water wing here, you know, obviously this also helps in wet weather. Or otherwise we've devised this little device called the right angle, and it's just really to put your right arm in the proper position. I mean, you can hit balls with them, and it's just to give you the proper feeling of where you should be at the top of the swing with the right arm, because most people do not focus enough attention on this right arm position.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as I'll describe here, if I hit a couple of balls down here, you'll be able to see how much more width I get at the top of my swing with this little wing on.
That looks good. Obviously this is an artificial aid and you can't use them in tournament play, but it certainly does give you a good feel on the practice tee.
It's comfortable enough that I can use it on the practice tee. And why don't you just tell everyone what this right angle does, huh?
Yes, well basically what it does, it ensures that my right arm gets into the 90-degree position at the top. You can see beyond that 90-degree position, which is great because it gives me a great feeling at the top of the swing where I should be. So just you simply fit it on. It's something we devised and really helped a lot of people. So
right.
Really you can hit balls with it and not even feel it's on after a short period of time. So it's just a case of trying to make a normal swing and sensing this. Good. About time I got a lesson from you.
That was really nice.
That straightening of the right leg causes so many problems. If I look at a lot of golfers, it's an area I really focus on. The fact that you don't get your weight into your right side, you don't load up, and the big thing is from here, the leg, everything else, the hands and arms can't catch up.
And leave everything behind. And I know that's something that you know, we've paid particular attention to the last couple of years, David, and that's trying to keep the flex in this right knee and ensure that we turn into it. Instead of letting it straighten here, we try and keep it flexed and turn into it here more, which will get you a better body coil.
Yeah, and if you do that, just do that again and have a look at it. Because if you just straighten that leg, you can see the big gap between the knees. The left knee tends to shoot out, the left hip goes down and get into a reverse pivot situation. Okay, so now the opposite happens obviously if you keep the flex in the knee. You get nicely behind the ball, the hips are more level, and you're in a much better balanced, loaded position. And certainly getting these legs in this position, this right knee flex and the left knee pointing more in rather than out, it puts you in such great balance and obviously provide the balance to your golf swing. A nice little exercise to check if you're doing it correctly, Nick, is you swing back, make sure that keeping the flex in the right knee, get to the top there, just feel that you could actually just raise your left foot off the ground very slightly. Good, and again. Good. Now you can obviously feel here that you've got the weight into your right side.
Right.
If you straighten your leg and left hip goes down and your left knee shoots out, there's no way you can actually lift your left foot off the ground because there's too much weight on the left leg. All right, so let's do that once more, and then I'm going to come down and... Good. Now, I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to just come behind you and hold your right knee and give you the feeling of what you need to have in order to get that sensation. Okay. You might just swing it back once more and just feel this. Now, you can see here, you feel like you're actually, I'm sure, sitting into it a bit more. There's more flex here, more pressure on the thigh.
A lot of tension on the inside of my thigh here.
Okay, good. And the other important point to note, as you swing back, see how your right knee actually rotates and swivels to a point where it looks on line with the outside of your... In other words, your turned out slightly at address, your knee is actually rotated from its original starting position in line with the foot. Okay? All right, now I'm going to hold this right knee for you. You go ahead and hit a shot. Well, that was good. I could really sense that you were sitting and flexing into that knee, and I'm sure if you do that correctly, okay, let's do it once more. Let me do the opposite here. You just swing it back, don't hit it, and I'll just try to really... You can sense where you are. You feel more of a tilt there, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still on my left side here, and I can feel that my hips and my legs are going to work the opposite way on the way down, and I'm going to do that.
Right, okay. Now we get that right knee in position. Right, you don't pay me enough money to do this all day, Nick. Why don't you go and practice on your own now?
Oh, hang on. I haven't had my money's worth yet, have I?
Right, let's summarize to the top of the backswing. At halfway back, make sure when your left arm is parallel to the ground that the butt end points between your feet and the ball. As far as your right arm is concerned, make sure at the top of the backswing that your right arm forms this 90-degree angle. You're then in a good position to come down. Lastly, check that right knee remains flexed. Sit into that knee, see how much coil and how much power you get. Examining great players over the years and good ball strikers, the thing I see, which is such a common denominator, is the way these players change direction. In other words, they're is that it's steeper on the backswing, direction a little shallower, and then pretty much gets into the same position as they were at address through impact. And I think is the key for good, solid ball striking direction as well.
Well, I agree as well, David, and I think it's something that we've looked at in players. I think it's something that's helpful for my ball striking.
Well, why don't you just illustrate this? Because I say the faults that I see with so many players, when they get to the top of the swing, you just get it to the top there, is that what happens is that the club actually gets too steep, and then in order to keep the club coming from the inside, then have to do it. So the fault really is the fact that it's too steep as they change direction, and then to throw it out, something to compensate with their body. And it does get the club from the inside, but it really puts them out of position and doesn't allow them to use their body correctly through impact. So something that I know a lot with good players is this steep change of direction. But you know, being a good player, they'll always find a way to get into an impact position.
Right.
So I think if you want to illustrate the right way here, Nick, just if you illustrate the fact where it is halfway back. Okay, now as you complete, okay, right, now we're in a position where as you're completing, your body's starting to unwind, and this really happens as you're going back, your body's starting to unwind, going to the left here. Right, but as this takes place, the shaft tends to now shallow out. So we've gone from this plane now down to this plane. The hands are working out, and it's really the body starting towards the target. Now, as we work down, we can see the plane is pretty much parallel to the original starting position. In other words, the way it started to address with the shaft, and as it comes back, it's going to pretty much mirror image the position it was at address. And this is the important thing. And it really happens, I think, Nick, as your body's moving, and I'm sure you feel it in your right arm. What points do you see?
Well, I have a tendency, once I get to the top of my swing, that I start getting my right arm to get in too close to my body. And even though the club's shallowing out, I haven't left myself much room to get back onto the ball. It's steep, and I hit the ball high. So what I try and do is feel that my right elbow stays the same width away here as it was on the way back.
Right. Do you feel your right arm actually straightening?
Feel the right arm straightening as I start my downswing, and it's going to create more width for me.
Right, and I think the key being, when you feel it straightening, you're actually not losing the angle here, retaining the wrist angle.
Retaining the wrist angle and the set in the wrists on the way down until they release earlier down here.
Right. So certainly I think the big thing is understanding this change of direction happens with your body movement, but also, big thing, feeling what your right arm's doing. So getting back to that right arm position, that the fault that many players have, getting the right arm out of position, gets the club too steep, and then having to make a compensation.
Okay, one of the drills that we've done for a long time is to tee the ball up. I normally use a 6 or a 7 iron in this drill. Tee the ball up fairly high. And the one thing that I always try and do is not to hit it too hard. I'm always just trying to do the motion. Hold the club in my right hand.
I'll just move back here, Nick, if you don't mind.
I'll choke down a little bit on it. And just a nice swing with the right hand.
That's good. Well, that gives you the feeling of the shallowing, the feeling of your right arm straightening, and gives you the sensation of width, doesn't it?
It's very difficult to hit the ball if you're narrow in here, Dave, because you really have to rotate your body out very quickly to get the club back to the ball. So what this does, it just helps me to swing my right arm freer and, as you say, get the club a little shallow on the way down.
It's really like throwing a ball. If you watch any of those great pitchers or anybody throwing a ball, they move back in as they change direction. It's like their arm actually moves this way. It's a distinct shallowing effect, and that obviously creates a situation where you get the path right, coming back to the ball, keeps the club face square, no manipulation, and you hit a lot of good shots.
And we always heard that people like to keep the right elbow close to the body on the way down, and I think it's very difficult, as we've discussed, to get any kind of club head or hand speed if the right elbow is close to the body. So even a good pitcher, you'll see that his right elbow is away from his body when he throws the ball.
The question I get asked a lot by the good players I teach is, what about leg action? And I see a lot of faults in this area, and I think probably some of it stems back from the fact that people used to be taught to drive their legs.
I know when we were taught as juniors, we were often taught to really drive legs hard from the top of the swing toward the target. And as you can see, what happens is I get my body in a bowed position and my shoulders very steep. It's very hard to get the club back to square from there. You almost have to flip it with your hands. And I'll show you. Maybe you'll recognize this swing.
There's a nice reverse. See, you can see this position here. That's a chiropractor's dream, that position. And yeah, it's true, because I think obviously the legs, I mean, they are important because for balance more than anything else. And if you just drive your legs, get this right knee driving as quick as you can, sort of puts the upper body in such a position, position where you're so far behind it. Now you've got to use your hands more to help to hit it.
Right, why don't you show us how to do it?
All right, well, a little drill that I think is important to really help this is to actually set up to it and actually hook your left foot in. You can see I've actually got my foot hooked in this position, because one thing this does, it allows you, as you change direction, to get the feeling that you've got a little bit of a leg separation, a little bit of a sit here. I mean, Sam Snead was probably most known for this particular movement. And a little bit of a leg separation, and then really hit into the left side, because what you want to do is turn around your left side rather than slide by it. And if your left knee works too far forward, as you illustrated there, obviously it's going to put you in this position where you're too far underneath it. So let's have a go here. So you want to start off gently here. You don't want to pull in your ligaments or anything. So just hook the left foot in gently, so you'll feel some pressure on the inside, and then just pretty much try to make the normal swing from there. Just a nice gentle movement to start with. Very good. Now, I say, you feel some strain down here, and it really forces you to get your right side going. So this way, with a little bit of work, you can really get a sensation of what a solid leg action is all about. Okay, I'm going to ask you to give that a go now.
Okay.
All right?
I think the other thing that we've got to
see, monkey do,
the other thing we really got to stress here is that when you do all these drills, you don't want to hit the ball too hard.
No, exactly.
You really want to just try and get the move down.
Right.
So there's my normal left foot position.
Right.
So I'll toe it in here.
There you go.
Feel a little bit of tension in the left. And just
very good. That looks more like that.
Feel like
my
chest is aiming at the target a lot better than the other way.
Right, and I just wanted you to hit a regular one, and because the whole key with doing these little drills is that you're trying to get the sensation. All these drills that we've been working on basically are to give people the feel. It's one thing to say, well, listen, I don't want you to do this or I want you to do that, but how do we get the body to feel? And all these little drills really help to give one the sensation of what should take place. So if you do it often enough, hopefully it'll become an integral part of your swing. In other words, muscle memory.
Right.
It's amazing over the years how your leg action has calmed down so much more. Now, it doesn't mean your legs aren't working, because really the quieter your legs are as you start down, the more speed you can have through impact. Where a lot of people go wrong is that they drive their legs and then actually come into the ball, the legs aren't moving at all.
Right, and one of the things that's happened to me is that as my legs have got quieter, I've started to hit the ball further.
That's right. So remember, for sure they provide some power, but they also provide resistance. So it allows you to wind and unwind your upper body. So what I'd like you to do, Nick, is hit one more shot for me, and I'm going to stand behind you and just put this glove right next to your left hip. And the whole key being is that obviously you swing back, and as you move away from it to swing it back, now you swing into the shaft here and then turn inside it. And I'm sure when you notice, to swing through to the finish here, you finish flat on that left foot. Players who drive their legs tend to roll to the outside of their foot too much. Okay, well, let's go ahead and we'll see if we can keep the shaft in position. Impact has often been described as the moment of truth. Obviously, where your club, where your body are at impact determine how the ball's going to fly. And I think a lot of good players have misinterpreted where they should be at impact. You hear all sorts of things, Nick, like, well, try to return to your dress position at impact. Well, that might be okay for the hands and the club, but certainly you want to get your body open. Sure, your hips need to be somewhat open, which most good players are, but the upper body as well, because if you get your upper body too square, and this happens through pulling the club to a large extent, the upper body's too square, in fact you're going to be too far back here, and then you're actually going to have to use your hands. So what we're talking in terms of, obviously, is trying to get the upper body more open so the right side can really help to release the club.
Yeah, we've got to remember that the right side delivers an awful lot of power in the golf swing.
Exactly, and you know, golf really is a two-sided game. So I feel now coming into the ball that your left side in actual fact is resisting to some extent, while your right side, and certainly your upper body, is really going forward towards the target. And if you can do that, it helps to keep the club on line without having to manipulate it.
Hey, what's this? I thought we were doing a golf video here. What are you doing on the tennis racket?
If this tape doesn't work, Nick, people can always take up tennis. But what it's to really illustrate is the fact that, you know, the right side really has to work. It's very much like hitting a forehand in tennis. And, you know, that big ball's too easy. I'm going to use the small ball here. But basically, in a forehand in tennis, your left foot is forward, and you're using your right side to actually release the racket. So the same thing happens in golf. So we're trying to feel that the right side actually works. See, a lot of people have a fear, good players have a fear of using their right side because they think, hey, well, they're going to hook it if they use their right side. They hear, well, too much right hand, too much right arm. But if you use your right side correctly, in actual fact, it'll keep the face square through the ball.
Right, and on the same theme is that another drill that we've devised and we've used for quite a long time now is if you just take your normal stance, okay, you want to put that club down there, David, so show where we're aiming.
All right, there you go.
Okay, and then we'll put the left foot a little closer to the ball. We'll drag the right foot back behind the left foot here.
Right, almost, so the toes are almost in line with the heel, right?
Right. Now,
okay.
Making sure that your shoulders are square, because there's a tendency to get your shoulders to follow the line of your feet.
Right, so you know, only your feet are closed, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Basically, what this is going to do is when I start downswing, I'm going to make sure that my left shoulder clears and allows my right side to deliver the club onto the ball.
Okay.
Shoulders are square.
Okay, so you feel that your left shoulder really starts to move, so it's like your left side moves first and then your right side follows up.
Right.
Okay, let's do that again. Okay. I know with this drill, when you hit balls doing this initially, it felt so good you didn't want to go back to the regular position.
I was hitting it so straight, that's why I wanted to go out on the golf course and play like that. But there we go, we've got the left foot in front of the right. Make sure my shoulders are square.
That's great. One. I mean, what it really does too, it gets your left side in a resisting position. It doesn't allow your hips to open as quickly, because a lot of players think, right, clear those hips, clear the hips, and it just gets the body so far behind, the upper body that is, that in actual fact your upper body is too square. So you get a better relationship between your upper body and your lower body coming into impact, so it really gets you the feeling of, right, let my right side really go. It's just like getting a ball once again and throwing it or hitting a forehand in tennis. So a lot of other sports you can relate to golf.
of the questions I'm frequently asked, Dave, is how much has the swing changed over the years?
Well, it has changed to some extent, mainly because of equipment. And I think the thing you're seeing these days is that the players are using the bigger muscles more in the swing than they did in the old days. In other words, much less hand action. Hand action really, I think, is a result of, say, using hickory shafts and the fact they had to square the club face off physically. And certainly, little shots around the greens, the hands are still used. But I think these days, for the most part, players are using less hands, more bigger muscles. And I think what I see with some players, the fact is when they use their hands too much, it's as a result of them being out of position in some other part of the golf swing. So they have to make up through impact with the hands. Remember, the less hands you use, the squarer the club face is going to be, the more consistent your shot pattern is going to be. So players who hit the ball at an inconsistent height or trajectory, who draw it or fade it without much control, normally you're going to find that the club face is closing very quickly through the ball. Right.
Flipping over a little too fast there.
Exactly.
Like that, huh?
Very, very handy. The club face is almost open to close in a very short space of time. And the good ball strikers such as yourself keep the club face on line an extremely long time through the ball. The club face is square to the target line and really working in conjunction with the body. So the body is in control of the club. It's more what I call a body release rather than a hands release. So if we can get the hands out of the swing, we're going to have a much better chance of being more consistent and hitting a consistent pattern of shot. Now, you know, we've tried this little drill before, Nick. It takes a little practice, but it's what we call a split hand drill, where you separate your hands on the shaft, probably about an inch or so. And what this does is to illustrate where your hands should be coming into impact. If you use a lot of hands, once you illustrate this, and the club face is closing, just work it through to the finish. Right, and again, let's really flip it now, because we normally see through impact the hands are really, right, that's it. Almost the left wrist gets cut through impact to some extent to the finish. And by the way, a lot of players who are handsy, a clue for this is a very high finish.
Right.
You normally find today, the modern swing, the club is much more around the body, much flatter finish than it used to be, sort of very much like Hogan.
Right.
So the key being with this drill, if you use your hands, especially your right hand to any extent, the club face is going to close rapidly, and you know you're going to hit this quick hook there and sort of move your left leg out of the way quickly. So this way, if you swing through, if you make a practice swing, just swing it through to your finish and then bring the club down. If you bring it down, the club face really should be square at this point to your body. You can see there's no wrap over or closing of the club face. So it takes a little practice, but it'll give you the feeling. And a lot of players, when they do this to start with, sort of feel like, well, I'm going to leave the club to the right, but really, or leave the ball to the right, I should say. But really, the body is squaring the face off. It's like if you just put the club in your navel there, just stick the club in your navel. As you now swing back to a little swing, now turn through, you see the turn of your body squares the face. It's not something you have to consciously do.
Right.
Right, now this little exercise, say, it does take some practice, but it's an excellent way of feeling your hands being passive through the swing. It'll feel like your right hand is more underneath your left hand. Well, you hit that one pretty straight.
And I got the club face back square there.
Let's hit a normal shot here.
Yeah.
I need a tee, you're a big boy now. Right, now bring the club down, let's look at the face position. And that's why you hit the ball so straight, Nick. Lucky man. Let's summarize. Straighten your right arm for width on the downswing and to shallow the plane of the club. Use your lower body for balance. Open up your chest through impact so your right shoulder chases all the way through to the finish. Keep your hands passive through impact for solid ball striking.